The room appears calm and orderly, offering the impression that attention has already been resting here for some time.
Awareness settles into the space without a clear sense of when that settling began.
Details register quietly, as if perception resumed mid-process rather than at a beginning. The moment feels entered rather than started. Time appears to progress, as though a small portion has already passed unnoticed. Nothing within the space signals a clear beginning point. The environment feels as though observation resumed after a brief interruption. Clarity exists without the memory of arriving at it. Objects appear already accounted for by attention. The scene suggests continuity without showing its starting edge. Attention feels aligned, though its entry point remains unclear. Nothing within the frame indicates when observation resumed. The present feels already in progress.
Awareness appears to have joined the moment slightly late.
The pause feels implicit rather than observable.
The moment carries the sense of having resumed rather than begun.
Awareness feels continuous despite the absence of a clear starting point.
Nothing contradicts the feeling that something was briefly missed.
The room offers no evidence of interruption. Continuity feels intact despite uncertainty about its beginning. The pause leaves no visible trace. Awareness continues without resolving when it resumed. The present feels uninterrupted, despite the sense of a missing moment.
Nothing confirms whether the pause occurred.
The moment feels ready to continue, as though nothing was ever missing. The room still feels familiar, but one detail no longer follows the logic attention expects. Light begins settling into places that feel slightly reassigned. Cause and effect begin separating without announcing themselves. Orientation changes register only after they are already present. Shadow structure begins following an internally inconsistent logic. Light begins favoring a direction that the window does not justify. Reflections begin referencing positions that feel subtly misassigned. Distance stops behaving as a reliable visual guide. Surface responses duplicate without explanation. Directional certainty weakens, while calm remains unchanged. Light organizes itself into patterns that feel unprompted. Object posture begins implying change without movement. Depth cues begin exchanging their roles. Expected gradients reverse without urgency.
Correspondence between form and outcome weakens gradually.
Single inputs begin producing multiple visual outcomes. Spatial logic bends without collapsing. Orientation shifts begin feeling selective rather than global. Separation between object and surface begins eroding. Light starts referencing the object rather than its source. Distance stops predicting clarity. Hierarchies of attention quietly dissolve.
Alignment errors accumulate without escalation. Causal direction becomes ambiguous. The room continues functioning while becoming harder to intuit. The room responds as though its reactions arrive slightly later than the moment that causes them. Visual effects continue even after their initiating conditions feel complete. The room appears to hold more than one moment at the same time. Conflicting time signals coexist without resolving into a single present. Cause and effect no longer agree on when events occur. Expectation begins arriving before observation can confirm it. Visual information begins repeating instead of refreshing. The moment feels present without feeling current. The room begins carrying visual memory alongside perception. More than one moment appears to occupy the same visual space. Effects no longer conclude when their causes end. Recognition now arrives after perception rather than alongside it. Time indicators begin disagreeing quietly.
The present starts feeling slightly retrospective. Object and environment no longer feel simultaneous. Change begins to feel buffered rather than immediate. The scene gives the impression of having already occurred. Temporal reference points begin sliding without direction. Visual memory overlaps with current input. The scene feels slightly behind itself. Completion no longer follows change immediately. The present stretches without advancing. The room behaves like a memory still forming. The scene appears to wait for itself. Time no longer asserts a single position within the room.
The room presents itself as complete, offering no indication of whether this moment is beginning or resuming.
Visual order returns in a way that quietly discourages further interpretation. Elements settle into relationships that feel sufficient without explanation. Orientation stabilizes in a way that no longer invites comparison.
Balance returns quietly, without clarifying what preceded it.
Light resumes behavior that aligns with expectation rather than inquiry. Visual complexity reduces without signaling an ending.
The environment settles into a readable and closed condition. Orientation holds steady in a way that resists reinterpretation. Cause and effect appear reconnected without commentary.
Spatial logic reasserts itself without acknowledging interruption. Continuity replaces variation without announcement. The room no longer implies progression or change.
Nothing within the frame suggests alteration. The scene feels sufficient without asserting finality.
Stability persists without indicating duration.
The present moment loses distinction from others.
Temporal markers lose relevance when repetition feels exact. Recognition replaces curiosity.
Nothing appears unresolved. The environment offers completion without explanation.
Nothing suggests a next moment. The scene feels complete in a way that implies recurrence.
Observation no longer produces discovery.
The room appears ready to be experienced again.